Okay, our next speaker is Florian Lennert, and he is a long-time collaborator with us, back to the CityCar days from, gosh, what, 6-7 years ago, something like that. Some of you know that project that we did some years ago. I have to read what Florian wrote to describe his talk, because I'm not sure what it means, but it's very interesting. We are evolving urban space-time and its life-projecting systems. The future will sustainably self-organize or automate ecological pathology. So I want to hear about that. Florian.
Thank you very much. I'm a historian and an economist, and I'm really interested in how we perceive and conceptualize the relationship between natural systems, social systems, and technological systems, and how that affects the urban form. So really, I want to zoom out a little bit and think about how in the history of the city, of course, we used always transport and other technologies to create the industrial society that we have now. It allowed us to divide labor, to project people, goods, and services, but also crucially resources such as water, and also remove waste and bring in energy to the city. So the city is really a space-time machine. It condenses and transforms space-time and allows us to move on to build better cities. And of course we were already there at the beginning of the 20th century when the last time we had a technological transformation that was affecting the city. All of a sudden we had electricity, which allowed us to connect all these different devices and think of the city as a shared space where you have elevators going up, you had trams going like this, but we also managed to build spaces that shared these different technologies. So you can see we really 100 years ago in the city of Berlin, we're already there where we want to get back to. We want to combine mass transit systems with people mobility and active mobility in cities. But then we found oil and we decided it was a great idea to put people into metal boxes and fill them with dinosaur poo and to rebuild our cities with these isolating infrastructures that are built to move metal boxes and not people. And the incredible economic and social and environmental waste that goes with it is, of course, the key dysfunctionality that we have to address. And so we need to move forwards to build more sustainable transport infrastructures, some that are multimodal, but also fleximodal, allowing us to use them for different purposes at different times and not have them isolated only for one purpose. And of course, we need to crucially decarbonize our economy, our cities in this world, and move to renewable energy systems. And we also need to start questioning a little bit why we are still trying to now reform the car, the automotive paradigm, and make it more efficient, when really things such as automating cars or sharing them aren't really the solutions to these problems. Yes, some people might still want to have this big 2-ton car, and even if it's electric, it still uses up a lot of space. Some people might want to move to other forms of more active mobility. And we have the ability now to trace individuals' mobility paths through the city. This is a wearable app which has modal recognition. It can see whether you're driving, walking, taking a bus, or cycling, and we can then create these wonderful maps that show us how people actually move through the city, switching between these modes. And of course, crucially, we will continue to need high-throughput mass transportation systems. It is nonsense to think that we can solve the world's transportation problems simply by automating cars or making them electric or sharing them. So of course, we need to continue to have these systems, but we need to think about how we make them more flexible and more open so that people can switch and use them in a more flexible way, but also how to make them smaller. This is a hailable automated little bus shuttle we're piloting in Berlin. You can hail it with your phone, and it has a flexible way to then route itself and pick up in an efficient way people for first, last mile services, bringing them to the next public transport stop. So really, rethinking public transport is even more important than rethinking the car, and we need to move towards this kind of multimodality, multifunctionality, where we can mix these different modes and allow people also to combine active and other low-speed forms of transport with high-speed, high-throughput transport systems. And of course, as we move forward, we also need to start questioning whether we can still keep up the separation between public and private transport. Much of what we see of the sharing economy has nothing to do with sharing. It's a hyper-efficient delivery of motorization services, such as Uber. Uber has thrown 70,000 cars into London recently. So that's part of the problem, not part of the solution. We need to find devices and transportation modes that can recombine and be both individual and mass transit. And we need to reshape our cities. This is a train station in Denmark that's being built, which is designed to allow people and bikes and other things to flow freely through the train station so that we can open up these modes and have a much better connectivity with them, which will then enable people to actually get rid of cars altogether in cities, as Kent mentioned already. And of course, one of the innovations that we never talk about, but which really has enabled the kind of dense cities that we have today is the elevator. And as we now move into the third dimension with cities, we need to also begin to think about how do we combine sort of horizontal transportation systems with vertical transportation systems. And again, we then need to think about how do we think of technological transportation solutions that can combine these different modes and perhaps be all these different modes at different times rather than have all these isolated and separated transport solutions. So really we need to move to an integrated transport system where we can move people around in a more efficient way. On the horizon, however, this is happening. The dream of flying was always there. We now have the technology with electric drones to move people, not just little parcels. And so fundamentally on the horizon, we are seeing, perhaps for the first time in human history, the switch over from the wheel as the dominant mode of transport and onto aerial transportation. But of course, all of this is not happens in isolation. It is driven by how we consume, how we want things being delivered to us ever more quickly. So the relationship between consumption and production in the city and the distribution of goods and passenger transport is key. We cannot just look at how people move. We have to understand how things move to us. And increasingly they move to us. We expect them to be there immediately. And if you look at what's happening in the drone space, of course, this is exploding at the moment, in particular in small goods delivery, and perhaps also something for Andorra to look at. In a mountainous region, perhaps some of these systems could be of help. However, we also need to be extremely careful that we don't just take the traffic jam and put it in the sky. Then we haven't solved anything either. So we need to think very cleverly about what role can distributed, intelligent, autonomous, and artificially intelligent systems play. They will shape our cities one way or another. And the question that we need to answer is, and that we need to shape is, do we want these technology systems to shape cities that are open, that are sustainable, that allow the free-flowing movement of people and goods, but also that have a natural relationship with our environment? Or, and this is the kind of the pathology at the horizon, is that we're simply at the moment automating all these unsustainable forms of transport and not really addressing the core issues here. And this might be the world that we end up instead, one where we have removed people and nature out of our cities, and we really build these machine parks that shape the future of the city. And I think it's those choices that we have to make today, and we're at a crossroads here to really think about how we can build better and more sustainable cities. Thank you.